After my grandparents died in a car accident, their lawyer told me I was the only heir to their $26 million estate. My family demanded I give it up, but I refused. That same night, they kicked me out. I moved into my grandparents' house. The next morning, they showed up to throw me out again until they saw who was standing next to me. Their faces went pale with shock. I thought I knew my family, but a staggering $26 million inheritance ripped off the mask, revealing a level of greed and betrayal so profound, it left me utterly homeless. This isn't just a story about money, it's about what happens when blood means less than a dollar sign. So, let's go back a bit. My name's Natalie, I'm 27, and until recently, I was just your average kindergarten teacher, barely scraping by in a tiny apartment. My parents, Richard and Diane, they were present physically, but emotionally, they were miles away. My dad was always chasing the corporate dream, clocking 60-hour weeks. My mom? She was all about networking, making sure she was seen in the right social circles. Family dinners were like rare constellations, and when they did happen, my parents were usually glued to their phones, lost in work calls, or planning their next big social event. There was food on the table, sure, a roof over my head, but warmth, guidance, that was a different story. From age 5, my real home was my grandparents' place. Elizabeth and Harold. Every weekend, every summer, I was there. They were wealthy, incredibly so, but you'd never know it. Their 4-bedroom house, sitting on 3 acres, was modest, welcoming. Grandpa Harold taught me to grow tomatoes in his sprawling vegetable garden. Grandma Elizabeth showed me how to bake cookies from scratch, how to sew a button. They were at every school play, every soccer game my parents conveniently missed. They built Alexander Logistics from the ground up, one truck in a garage in the 70s, dreaming big. By the time I was born, it was a regional powerhouse, 200 trucks, 5 warehouses across 3 states. And yet, Grandpa drove the same pickup truck for 2 decades. Grandma clipped coupons. They taught me, Natalie, money is just a tool, not a measure of your worth. Use it to build something meaningful, not to impress people who don't matter. This philosophy, this deep-seated belief, was exactly why my dad, their only son, had such a fractured relationship with them. He expected to inherit everything, to live this lavish, opulent life. He actually resented their frugality, calling them stingy, old-fashioned. What they saw as character building, he saw as deprivation. They paid for his college, but he still had to work summer jobs. They helped him with the down payment on a starter home, not the luxury condo he demanded. The final straw? He wanted a senior position in their company, with 0 experience. They said no. He needed to earn it. He stormed out, took a corporate job, and that was it. Their relationship was never the same. With me, though, it was different. They paid for my education, debt-free, but pushed me to follow my passion, not just a paycheck. When I told them I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, earning barely minimum wage, they were genuinely thrilled. Through my adult life, our bond grew even stronger. Sunday dinners were a sacred tradition. I'd help them with their smartphones, video calls. They'd share family recipes, stories from their youth. Holidays? I was always at their house, not my parents', which, of course, fueled my mother's constant indignation, seeing it as a personal rejection. My own apartment was small, cozy, filled with secondhand treasures and plants. My teacher's salary was enough. I found joy in the simple things, library books, hiking, volunteering at the animal shelter. My grandparents respected that. They'd occasionally surprise me with practical gifts, like new tires or a fancy blender, but they never tried to change me. Then, 6 weeks ago, my world shattered. I was grading papers, just a regular Tuesday evening, when the call came from the police. A drunk driver. A red light. My grandparents, Elizabeth and Harold, gone. Just like that. Instantly. The officer said they didn't suffer, and in a way, I clung to that, but it was little comfort. The funeral? It was a complete haze. I vaguely remember my parents, Richard and Diane, taking charge, arguing with the funeral director about costs, as if every penny was a personal affront. My brother, Jason, flew in from California, glued to his phone the entire time. Aunt Pam, my dad's sister, put on this dramatic, teary performance, but the moment a camera was out of sight, the waterworks dried up. Her husband, Uncle Steve, just hovered awkwardly, a silent shadow. None of them had bothered to visit my grandparents in years, and, suddenly, they were the picture of the grieving family. I felt numb. Just utterly, completely numb. The 2 people who truly saw me, truly understood me, were gone. Their beautiful, warm home, now a cold, empty shell. I couldn't even bring myself to step inside after the service. I just went back to my tiny apartment, took bereavement leave, and tried to exist in this new, crushing reality. 2 weeks later, the lawyer, Matthew Goldstein, called. He'd been my grandparents' attorney and friend for over 30 years. He asked me and my immediate family to come for the will reading. I had no idea how that one meeting would rip open everything I thought I knew about my family. The morning was gray, drizzly, perfectly matching my mood. Matthew was kind, his eyes full of genuine sadness for Elizabeth and Harold, people he clearly loved. It made my own eyes prickle. Then, the glass door swung open. And the circus arrived. My father, Richard, stormed in first, impatiently checking his expensive watch. He looked like an older, harsher version of my grandpa, but with none of the warmth. My mother, Diane, floated in behind him, her designer bag probably worth more than my monthly rent. My 25-year-old brother, Jason, swaggered in, wearing sunglasses indoors, his wrinkled button-up half tucked into jeans, his idea of business attire, I guess. Then came Aunt Pam, already loudly complaining on her phone about some country club drama, Uncle Steve trailing behind, trying to avoid eye contact. None of them had seen my grandparents in ages, yet here they were, ready to claim their spoils. Well, let's get this over with, my father snapped, no greetings, no condolences. Some of us have actual businesses to run. Matthew's smile thinned, but he just led us to the conference room. The air was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. My father took the head of the table, an unspoken declaration of authority. I huddled near Matthew. Everyone else arrayed themselves in their usual power dynamic. Matthew started, I want to clarify. Elizabeth and Harold were of completely sound mind when they updated their will last year. They were thorough, explicit. My father snorted. Just read it, Matt. We know how it goes. Dad built the business, I'm his son. Standard inheritance. Matthew ignored him, opened his leather portfolio, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. The formal legal jargon droned on, my family shifting impatiently, waiting for the real part. And then he got to it. We hereby bequeath our entire estate, he read, his voice clear, including cash assets totaling approximately $8 million, an investment portfolio valued at approximately $12 million. Real estate holdings including our primary residence valued at $5 million, and our 25% ownership stake in Alexander Logistics, valued at approximately $1 million. To our beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. The room went utterly, chillingly silent. My breath caught in my throat. $26 million? To me? I was sure I'd misheard. Matthew continued, we specifically and intentionally make no provisions for our son Richard Alexander, our daughter-in-law Diane Alexander, our grandson Jason Alexander, our daughter Pamela Davis, or our son-in-law Stephen Davis, as we have provided for them during their lifetime and have made our reasons clear to our attorney. The silence shattered. Let me see that. My father roared, jumping up, his chair clattering backward. He ripped the document from Matthew's hands, scanning it, his face contorting. This is ridiculous. My mother joined the chorus. $26 million to a kindergarten teacher? She wouldn't know the first thing about managing that kind of money. Jason slammed his hand on the table. What about me? I'm family. I need startup capital for my business ventures. Aunt Pam rounded on me, her face flushed with fury. What did you do? How did you manipulate them into this? I just sat there, frozen, utterly shocked. My mind reeled. Matthew, bless him, calmly retrieved the will. Please, everyone, take your seats. There is more. He then pressed a remote, and a large screen lit up. There they were. Grandma Elizabeth and Grandpa Harold, sitting on their living room sofa, looking exactly as they had the last time I saw them. My heart clenched with a painful, desperate longing. Grandpa Harold began, his voice so familiar. If you are watching this, it means we have passed on. We want to explain our decisions directly, to prevent any misunderstandings. Grandma Elizabeth continued, Richard, Pam, we love you as our children, but we have been deeply disappointed by the values you have embraced and passed to your own children, with the exception of Natalie. For what felt like an eternity, they laid it all out. Decades of my father and aunt prioritizing wealth over family. Treating them as a resource, not as parents. Missed family events, requested loans never repaid, their dismissive attitudes toward their modest lifestyle. The business we built, Grandpa said, his voice firm, was never about amassing wealth for its own sake. It was about creating security for our family and opportunities for our employees. We built it through hard work, integrity, and treating people fairly. Grandma added, Natalie is the only one who has demonstrated these values consistently. She visits us not because she wants something, but because she genuinely cares. She chose a career helping children despite the low pay because it fulfills her purpose. Grandpa concluded, we trust Natalie to be a good steward of what we have built, not to squander them on status symbols or get-rich-quick schemes. The video went on, detailing their hopes for how the inheritance could support education and community development, causes they had always held dear. As the screen went dark, the silence was once again deafening, before my father erupted. This is absolute garbage. They were clearly senile. We'll contest this will. No judge will uphold this insanity. Matthew, utterly unruffled, replied, "They anticipated that response, Richard. They underwent extensive cognitive testing before finalizing this will, with multiple independent doctors certifying their competence. Additionally, they documented years of behaviors that informed their decision. I must advise you, contesting this will would be extremely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to succeed." My mother, Diane, then pivoted, her voice suddenly sugary sweet. "Honey, sweet Natalie, darling, you understand this isn't right. Your grandparents were confused. This money belongs to the family, not just you. You'll share it with us, won't you?" I felt completely exposed, all eyes on me. I have to think about this," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I had no idea they would do this." Jason scoffed. "Think about it? There's nothing to think about. That money should be divided equally, or managed by someone with actual business experience." Meaning him, of course. As the arguing escalated, Matthew gently touched my arm. "You don't have to decide anything today, Natalie. Take time to process." He handed me a thick envelope, documents, keys to the house, contacts for financial advisors. "My office will handle all immediate matters. Call me anytime." The meeting dissolved into pure pandemonium after that, threats of lawsuits, accusations flying. Matthew eventually asked everyone to leave. As we were filing out, my father grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly rough. "This discussion is not over," he hissed. "Come to our house tonight at 6. We will sort this out as a family." His tone left no room for doubt. I just nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to argue. Watching them drive away in their luxury cars, I sat in my beat-up sedan, clutching that envelope, the weight of it all pressing down. How had an inheritance, meant as a blessing, become such a terrifying curse? The afternoon was a blur. I drove aimlessly, the envelope from Matthew still unopened on the passenger seat. Part of me was desperate to know more, terrified of what it all meant. At 5:45, I pulled into my parents' sprawling driveway, all granite and glass, designed to impress, never to welcome. Everyone else was already there. I took a deep, fortifying breath, grabbed the envelope, and went inside. They were waiting in the formal living room, a space usually reserved for my mother's social climbing. My father stood by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in hand, looking like a judge presiding over a courtroom. My mother perched uncomfortably on a designer chair, Jason sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, and Aunt Pam paced nervously, while Uncle Steve stared out the window, looking utterly miserable. "Sit down, Natalie," my father commanded the moment I entered. I chose a chair near the door, a little voice in my head whispering, "You might need a quick exit." "Let's be reasonable about this," he began, his business negotiation voice dripping with condescension. "Your grandparents clearly weren't thinking straight. They meant for the family to benefit, not just you." My mother chimed in, "Sweetheart, managing wealth is complicated. Your father has the experience. You can still get a nice portion, enough for a real house, not that tiny apartment." The implication, the sneer in her voice, made my skin crawl. But I stayed silent. Emboldened, my father continued, "Here's our proposal. You sign over the estate to me, as the financial head of the family. I'll ensure everyone gets their fair share. You'll receive 10%, which is more than generous considering your limited needs." 10%. My voice finally returned. "That's still over $2 million. "Exactly." Jason jumped in. "More than enough for a teacher. I need at least $5 million for my cryptocurrency exchange platform. It's going to be huge." I just stared at him. Jason, whose business ventures were a revolving door of get-rich-quick schemes, never holding a job for more than 3 months. His last app, for rating public restrooms, had imploded after burning through 50 grand of my parents' money. "The house should go to us," Aunt Pam suddenly interjected, as if it were a casual suggestion. "We have 3 children to consider. That neighborhood would give them access to better schools." I almost laughed. This woman had never once visited my grandparents in that house. Her kids, my cousins, were practically strangers. As the evening wore on, their tactics shifted. Demands turned into guilt trips. "After all we've done for you," my mother dramatically sighed, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. "We gave you life, a good home, opportunities. Is this how you repay family loyalty?" I nearly choked on my water. Loyalty? When was the last time either of them called just to check on me? When did they ever attend one of my school performances? My father changed strategies again, his voice dropping to a menacing register. "We're not asking, Natalie. We're telling you what will happen. Either you sign the transfer documents voluntarily, or we will contest the will. We'll bring up every questionable interaction you had with your grandparents. How often did you visit them alone? What did you tell them about us when we weren't there? It will get ugly." The threat hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I felt sick, but something inside me hardened. A memory surfaced, Grandpa Harold, teaching me to stand my ground during a playground dispute when I was 8. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away, Natalie," he'd said. "Know what is right and hold firm." Uncle Steve, Bless him, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice quiet. Maybe we should all calm down. Give Natalie some time to think. This is a lot to process. My father rounded on him like a wolf. Stay out of this, Steve. This is family business. Uncle Steve, for his part, tried to stand firm. I am family, he replied softly, but he visibly retreated under my father's furious glare. The clock ticked past 9. Jason was already drafting crude transfer paperwork on his laptop. My mother was on the phone with their attorney, discussing wording. Aunt Pam was scrolling through real estate listings for my grandparents' house, talking about which walls she'd knock down first. They had already divided my inheritance without my consent, meticulously planning how they'd spend every single dollar. Not once did they mention my grandparents' wishes. Not once did they ask what I thought. At 10:30, my father printed the document and slid it across the coffee table to me, along with a pen. Sign it, he demanded. Now. I picked up the paper. The language was outrageously broad, essentially signing away all my rights. In return, a percentage, to be determined later at my father's sole discretion. I put the paper down, took a deep breath. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The room went absolutely silent. What did you just say? My father's voice was dangerously low. I said no. I will not sign this, or anything like it. My grandparents trusted me with their legacy for a reason. I intend to honor that trust. My mother launched into a furious tirade about ingratitude. Jason called me names I won't repeat. Aunt Pam began sobbing theatrically about her children's future. But through it all, I sat still. That single word, no, had become a shield. Finally, my father slammed his glass down so hard it cracked. That's enough, he roared. I always told Dad you weren't to be trusted. You manipulated them, just like you're trying to manipulate us now with this innocent act. He stalked towards me, his finger jabbing inches from my face. You have a choice to make right now, Natalie. Either you sign that paper and remain part of this family, or you take your precious inheritance and consider yourself disowned. You cannot have both. The ultimatum hung in the air, thick with menace. I looked around at their faces, searching. For love. For understanding. I found none. In that gut-wrenching moment, I finally understood a painful, horrible truth. They had never really seen me as family. I was just a means to an end, a potential source of money. Nothing more. I'm not signing, I said firmly, standing up. I'm sorry you feel this way, but I have to respect what Grandma and Grandpa wanted. Then get out of my house, my father snarled. Pack your things and leave tonight. You are no longer welcome here. I live in my own apartment, I reminded him, my voice flat. I have for years. He laughed coldly. The apartment we co-signed for, because your teacher salary couldn't qualify for the lease? Check your agreement, Natalie. We own that building through one of our investment companies. Consider your lease terminated. My stomach dropped. He was right. When I couldn't qualify, they'd helped. I had no idea they actually owned the building through a shell company. You have 30 minutes to pack essential items, my mother said, checking her watch, her voice chillingly calm. The locks will be changed tomorrow. I stood there, frozen in utter shock. They were actually kicking me out, making me homeless. Over money they had never earned. The clock is ticking, Jason smirked. Better hurry, sis. Those $26 million won't keep you warm tonight. 30 minutes. To pack up my entire life. I moved on autopilot, stuffing clothes, toiletries, important documents, a few sentimental items into bags. My mind was screaming, how could they do this? How could money turn my family into complete strangers? My father stood in my bedroom doorway, arms crossed, watching me like a guard watching a prisoner. My mother was already downstairs, on the phone with a real estate agent about selling my grandparents' house, her voice echoing up the stairs. You were never really part of this family anyway, my father said, his voice a cold blade, as I crammed clothes into a duffel bag. Your mother and I were going to divorce before she got pregnant with you. You were the obligation that kept us together. The casual cruelty of his words staggered me. I'd always sensed I was unwanted, but to have it confirmed so bluntly. We've wasted enough time and money on you, my mother added, appearing in the doorway. Your private school tuition, braces, summer camps, all those dance lessons you were terrible at. Consider this the end of our investment. Investment. Not love. Not care. Investment. As if I were a stock that had performed poorly. Jason appeared next, leaning against the wall, a smug smirk plastered across his face. You'll regret this when you have nothing and no one, he said. That money will run out faster than you think. And then what? You'll come crawling back, and we'll remember how you chose cash over family. I zipped up my final bag, fighting back a torrent of tears. I refused to cry. I would not give them the satisfaction. Is that everything? My father demanded. I looked around the room that had been mine since childhood, though I'd only stayed there occasionally since college. Ballet trophies, my framed diploma, bookshelves overflowing with novels, photo albums. So much left behind. I can come back for the rest later, I said, my voice cracking slightly. My father laughed. There won't be a later. Whatever you leave tonight goes to charity or the trash. Your call. The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. They were erasing me. Completely. All because I wouldn't hand over money they had done absolutely nothing to earn. I grabbed my grandmother's patchwork quilt from the bed, stuffing it into my already overflowing bag. That I would not leave. With 3 bags slung over my shoulders, another clutched in my hand, I made my way downstairs. No one offered to help. At the front door, I turned one last time. My family stood in a grim line, faces a kaleidoscope of anger, disappointment, and smug satisfaction. You might have money now, my mother said, her voice dripping venom, but family is forever. You'll realize what you've thrown away. I'm not the one throwing away family, I replied quietly, my voice barely a whisper. You are. With that, I walked out. The doors slammed behind me with a sickening finality. Standing beside my beat-up car in their pristine driveway, the weight of everything crashed down. Homeless. Disowned. In a few hours, I'd gained millions, but lost the only flawed support system I had ever known. I collapsed into my car, finally letting the tears come. Great, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for my grandparents, their absence a raw wound. I cried for the family I'd always hoped for but never truly had. Mostly, I cried for myself, adrift in a world that had completely changed. After what felt like an eternity, I wiped my eyes, started my old car. Nowhere to go. Hotels? No credit. Friends? How could I even begin to explain this mess at midnight? Then I remembered Matthew's envelope. I fumbled it open, and there, nestled inside, was a set of keys with a familiar, rabbit-shaped keychain. Grandma's. The keys to their house. The house that was, impossibly, now mine. The drive took about 20 minutes, each mile a tug-of-war between the desperate comfort of their home and the terrifying thought of entering it without them. I'd avoided it since the funeral, unable to face the emptiness. But tonight, I had no choice. The porch light was on, probably on Grandpa's old timer. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes, just trying to gather some courage. Finally, I grabbed a bag and walked to the front door, the key trembling in my hand. Inside, it smelled exactly the same. Grandma's lemon verbena potpourri, Grandpa's wood polish. I flipped on the lights, half expecting to hear their voices calling from the kitchen. But there was only a deafening silence. I made my way to the guest room, the one I'd always used, dropped my bag on the bed. Everything was exactly as I'd left it from my last weekend visit, just a month before the accident. The novel I was reading, still on the nightstand with my bookmark inside. Fresh towels, folded on the dresser, placed there by Grandma, anticipating my next stay. The sheer thoughtfulness of it, that expectation of continuity they couldn't have known would be shattered, undid me again. I sank onto the bed and cried myself into an exhausted sleep, fully clothed, on top of the covers. Morning came with a cruel, disorienting brightness. For a moment, I actually expected to smell coffee brewing, hear Grandpa's off-key whistling. But reality crashed back. Silence. They were gone. And I had inherited not just their fortune, but their enemies, my own family. My phone, of course, had blown up overnight. Texts and missed calls, mostly from my parents, a dizzying back and forth between threats and sudden, sickening attempts at reconciliation. We can work this out if you'll be reasonable, my mother's message read. My father was less subtle. You have 24 hours to reconsider before we file suit. Jason's was the most chilling. Enjoying the big empty house? Not for long. That last one sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just bluster. It felt like a promise of something uglier. I immediately forwarded it to Matthew, who responded in seconds. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Do not open the door for anyone else. His urgency alarmed me, but also brought a strange comfort. Finally, someone was truly on my side. Matthew arrived exactly on time, carrying a briefcase and 2 coffees. I ushered him into the kitchen, and we sat at the breakfast nook where my grandparents always had their casual meals. First things first, he said, sliding a warm cup toward me. Your family has already contacted 3 different attorneys about contesting the will. I anticipated this. I've prepared countermeasures. I wrapped my hands around the mug. They kicked me out last night. My father owns my apartment building through some investment company. Matthew nodded grimly. Typical Richard. Using leverage to force compliance. But what he didn't tell you is that your grandparents provided for this exact scenario. He pulled out a deed to a small cottage about 20 minutes outside of town. Your grandmother bought this 5 years ago, kept it in a separate trust just for you. Richard has no idea. You have somewhere to go if you need it. A wave of relief washed over me. At least I wouldn't be homeless. But the idea of hiding out while my family circled like vultures still gnawed at me. There's something else you should know, Matthew continued. You're not alone in this. Your grandparents had many loyal friends and associates who understood the situation with your family. As if on cue, a knock sounded at the back door. Matthew smiled. That would be Carlos. Carlos. The name was vaguely familiar. Carlos Ramirez, Matthew explained. He's been your grandparents' estate manager and handyman for 15 years. Lives in the guest house out back. I opened the door to a man in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes, holding his hat respectfully. Miss Natalie, he said warmly. I am very sorry about your grandparents. They were wonderful people. I saw your car this morning and wanted to check if you needed anything. That simple kindness, after everything, nearly brought me to tears again. Thank you, Carlos. I'm a bit overwhelmed, to be honest. Carlos nodded. Mr. Harold and Mrs. Elizabeth worried about that. They asked me to look after you if anything happened to them. The house, the grounds, everything is maintained. I've been keeping watch. Matthew invited Carlos to join us. Over the next hour, Carlos shared stories I'd never heard, painting a picture of two people deeply respected and beloved by those who worked for them, not just by their entitled family. Your father and brother, Carlos said carefully, they came here after the funeral, when no one was around. They took things. Watches, jewelry, some electronics. I have it all on the security cameras. My stomach clenched. My father had installed that security system years ago, supposedly for their protection. I'd forgotten about the cameras. Carlos shook his head sadly. They didn't know Mr. Harold had me update the system last year. He didn't trust the old one your father put in. Said it had too many blind spots. Matthew made a note. That footage could be very useful if they pursue legal action. There's more, Carlos continued. Mrs. Elizabeth kept detailed journals. She documented everything, especially family visits and interactions. They're in her study. I followed Carlos to Grandma's small study. A built-in bookcase held dozens of leather-bound journals, meticulously dated. Carlos pulled one out. This one mentions when your father asked for money last year, for some investment opportunity. I opened the journal, recognizing Grandma's elegant handwriting. May 15th. Richard visited today. First time in 7 months. Didn't ask about our health or lives. Immediately launched into pitch about cryptocurrency investment requiring $250,000. When Harold refused, Richard became hostile. Accused us of preferring Natalie. Said we were naive to trust her when she only visits to secure her inheritance. Could not be more wrong. Natalie has never asked for money. Has no idea of our net worth. Brings food every Sunday and stays to eat with us. Richard left without finishing his coffee. Harold very upset afterward. I read entry after entry, documenting years of similar interactions, my father's demands for money, my brother's absurd business pitches, my mother's thinly veiled comments about their modest lifestyle embarrassing her social standing. And then, in stark contrast, descriptions of my visits, genuine warmth, small gifts I'd brought, conversations we'd shared, help I'd offered. She saw me in a way my parents never had. As I read, the doorbell rang again. Carlos answered it, returning with an older woman in a practical dress and cardigan. Dorothy Reynolds, he introduced her. Your grandparents' housekeeper for 20 years. Dorothy hugged me tightly. You look just like Elizabeth when she was young, dear. She was so proud of you. Over the next few hours, more people arrived. Rosa Martinez, my grandparents' business partner, who knew every detail of Alexander Logistics and offered to guide me. George Patel, their investment advisor, who brought comprehensive portfolios, showing exactly how my inheritance was structured. Sarah Johnson, their neighbor for 30 years, who brought a homemade casserole and stories from my childhood. Each person brought not just information, but genuine affection. They had all loved my grandparents, and by extension, they cared deeply about me. While going through Grandma's desk, Dorothy found a hidden compartment containing letters from my father spanning decades, each one a request for money, some with veiled threats about cutting off my access if they refused. She also kept this, Dorothy said, handing me a USB drive. Security footage from after the funeral. Your mother was going through Elizabeth's jewelry before the reception even ended. She took several valuable pieces, claiming Elizabeth would have wanted her to have them. My grandparents, it seemed, had been meticulously documenting my family's behavior for years, perhaps knowing this day would come. They hadn't just built a financial safety net for me, they had built a robust network of support and evidence to protect their wishes. Around 4 p.m., as Matthew guided me through complex financial documents, my phone pinged. Another text from Jason. Hope you're enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. Dad, Mom, Aunt Pam, Uncle Steve, and I are coming over tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to collect what rightfully belongs to us. Better not try to stop us or things will get ugly. I showed it to Matthew. His expression hardened. Threats and potential breaking and entering, he muttered. I think it's time to activate the final part of your grandparents' plan. He made several quick calls, speaking cryptically about meetings and evidence. When he finished, he turned to me, his gaze determined. Your grandparents anticipated this exact scenario, Natalie. They knew Richard and the others would not accept their decision. They prepared for it. Tomorrow morning, we will be ready for them. But tonight, I suggest you review these materials so you understand exactly what you are fighting for. He gestured to the pile of journals, financial documents, and legal papers spread across the dining room table. Your grandparents built more than just wealth. They built relationships based on trust and respect. That is their true legacy to you. As everyone except Carlos left for the evening, promising to return the next morning, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't alone. My grandparents had ensured that they had given me not just their money, but their wisdom and their community. I spent the evening engrossed, reading through journals and financial reports, getting to know my grandparents in a new, profound way. They had been strategic, thoughtful, meticulous in their planning. Everything they had done was deliberate, including their choice of heir. For the first time since the will reading, I felt truly ready, equal to the immense responsibility they had entrusted me with. I would not let them down. As I prepared for bed, another text came through from Jason. Better sleep with one eye open, sis. Tomorrow you'll see what happens to people who steal from this family. Instead of fear, a cold, hard resolve settled deep within me. Tomorrow would indeed show what happens when people try to steal from family, but not in the way Jason imagined. The next morning, I woke early, a nervous tremor in my stomach, but beneath it, a rock-solid determination. By 8 a.m., Matthew was there with coffee, pastries, and a thick folder. These are restraining orders, he explained, ready to be filed if necessary. And these are cease and desist letters for Jason's charming threats. Dorothy arrived next, immediately taking over the kitchen, the familiar smells of bacon and coffee filling the house, a strange, grounding comfort before the storm. By 9:30, the house was filling with allies. Carlos stood by the front door, a silent, imposing guardian. Rosa Martinez, my grandparents' business partner, set up her laptop at the dining table, ready to drop financial bombshells. Dorothy bustled around, her quiet hospitality a direct link to my grandparents. At 9:45, the first car pulled into the long driveway. My father's black luxury sedan. Then my mother's white SUV. Aunt Pam and Uncle Steve's ridiculous red convertible. And finally, Jason's impractical sports car, which he could only afford because my parents paid his rent. There early, Matthew observed, trying to catch us off guard. The doorbell rang aggressively, followed by pounding. Matthew nodded to Carlos, who opened the door. My father stood on the threshold, momentarily stunned to see Carlos, not me. Behind him, my family clustered, their faces a mix of anger, entitlement, and smug anticipation. "Where's Natalie?" my father demanded, his voice sharp. "This is family business." Carlos, unmoving, just said, "Miss Natalie is expecting you. Please come in." They filed into the foyer, stopping dead when they saw the gathering in the living room. I stood in the center, Matthew a reassuring presence behind me. "What is this?" my mother spat, her voice brittle. "You brought outsiders into a private family matter." Before I could even respond, the front door opened again. 3 more people entered. First, Judge Robert Henderson, a tall, dignified man in his 70s, a decades-long friend of my grandparents. My father's face went white. The judge had ruled against him in a business dispute years ago, a case my father had tried, and failed, to manipulate through his social connections. "Robert," my father stammered, attempting a jovial tone that withered on his lips. "What brings you here?" The judge's expression remained stern. "I am here at the request of Harold and Elizabeth Alexander, through their attorney, Matthew Goldstein. They asked me, in the event of their deaths, to serve as an impartial witness to any family disputes regarding their estate." My mother turned to Chief Maria Williams, who followed the judge. "This is ridiculous. We're here to collect family heirlooms. Why is law enforcement present?" The chief smiled thinly. "I'm here as a friend of the Alexander family, ma'am. Not in an official capacity. Unless, of course, someone commits a crime. In which case, my official duties would naturally take precedence." The implied threat was a cold, sharp blade. As if on cue, the back door opened, and 6 more people entered, forming a powerful semicircle behind me. Longtime employees from Alexander Logistics. People who had known my father since he was a kid, who had witnessed his transformation from entitled son to absent family member. "You've got to be kidding me," Jason muttered. "Is this supposed to intimidate us?" I stepped forward, drawing strength from the incredible support surrounding me. "I know why you're here. You believe you're entitled to my grandparents' estate despite their explicit wishes. You think you can bully or threaten me into giving you what you want." My father's face hardened, a mask of fury. "Those old fools were manipulated. We are simply here to correct that injustice." From behind me, Thomas Jang, my grandparents' financial advisor, spoke. "Actually, Richard, I have documentation of every attempt you've made to access your parents' assets over the last 20 years. He opened a folder. "This includes the unauthorized transfer attempt from their retirement account in 2016, the forged check incident in 2018, And your attempt to have Elizabeth declared incompetent last year after she refused to fund Jason's failed cryptocurrency venture. My father's face went from pale to beet red. That's taken out of context. Rosa Martinez stepped forward, tablet in hand. I also have records of the company loan you never repaid, Richard. $200,000 borrowed in 2012 for your vacation home in Aspen. Your parents never pursued repayment, though they certainly could have. One by one, my grandparents, friends, and associates presented their evidence, a damning cascade of my family's attempts to extract money, contrasted with their utter disinterest in my grandparents' actual lives. Aunt Pam, who'd been fuming silently, suddenly shrieked at me. You ungrateful little snake. You turned our parents against us, poisoned them with lies. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Davis, I reviewed the video journals Elizabeth kept. There was no external influence. Your parents were quite clear about their reasoning. This is all very theatrical, my mother dismissed, waving a hand. But it changes nothing. We will contest the will. We will win. Matthews stepped forward. I have prepared documentation for you all. He handed each family member a thick envelope. It includes evidence that would become public record if you contest the will. Banking records, text messages, emails, and video evidence of your interactions with Harold and Elizabeth over the past decade. I encourage you to review it before making decisions about legal action. Uncle Steve, bless him, who had remained silent until now, opened his envelope. His face grew increasingly pale as he read. After a moment, he touched Aunt Pam's arm. We should go, he said quietly. This is not a fight we can win. She angrily shrugged him off. My father isn't giving up so easily. But my father had gone completely still, his eyes fixed on the contents of his envelope. There were records of shady business dealings he definitely wanted to keep private, along with transcripts of the cruel things he'd said about his own parents when he thought no one was listening. Chief Williams stepped forward. I should also mention that the property is under 24-hour security surveillance. Any attempt to remove items without permission would constitute theft. Carlos nodded. The new system records everything inside and out, all backed up to secure cloud storage. As my family absorbed the chilling implications, I walked to the sideboard and picked up a stack of documents Matthew had prepared. These, I said, handing them to Jason, are cease and desist orders regarding the threats you have made. I continued, passing papers to my father. These are notices that I am aware of the items taken from this house after the funeral and expect their immediate return. My mother started to protest, but I cut her off. And these, I said, giving her the final document, are the terms under which I am willing to maintain any relationship with you all going forward. They include respect for my grandparents' wishes and an end to all attempts to contest the will. The room fell silent again, a different kind of silence this time. The bitter, stunned silence of defeat. They finally understood. My grandparents hadn't just legally protected their decisions, they had anticipated and documented every single possible challenge. The incredible community of support they had built stood firmly with me, presenting a united front my family had never, ever expected. My father was the first to break. This is not over, he said, but the words were hollow, defeat already etched onto his face. Actually, Richard, Judge Henderson replied, it is. Your parents were meticulous. Any judge in this county would uphold their wishes based on the evidence they compiled. One by one, my family members retreated toward the door, their bluster dissolving into pathetic mutters. Jason glared at me as he passed. This isn't the end, he hissed. Perhaps not, I replied, my voice steady, but it is the end of you taking advantage of this family. My grandparents saw who you really are. That's why we are all here today. As they stumbled out to their cars, the toxic tension in the room evaporated. Dorothy immediately began serving fresh coffee and pastries, as if to cleanse the space. The others gathered around me, offering congratulations and quiet support. I felt strangely empty, neither triumphant nor devastated. I had stood my ground, protected my grandparents' wishes, but in the process, I had lost what little remained of my biological family. The victory felt hollow. Judge Henderson seemed to sense my inner conflict. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Your grandparents would be proud, Natalie. Not just of what you did today, but how you did it, with dignity and principle. Rosa nodded in agreement. You are more like them than anyone else in the family. That's why they trusted you with everything. As my family's cars disappeared down the driveway, I realized I had crossed an irreversible threshold. The family I had known was gone. But in their place stood a new community, bound by genuine respect and shared values, the true legacy my grandparents had built over a lifetime. It wasn't the family I was born into, but perhaps it was the family I was meant to have all along. 6 months. 6 months blurred into a whirlwind of learning, adjusting, and the hard, painful acceptance that my biological family had truly chosen money over any semblance of relationship. The first few weeks after that confrontation were the hardest. Endless legal paperwork, tough financial decisions, and the gut-wrenching realization that they were truly gone from my life. Oh, they made a few half-hearted attempts to reconcile, but only when they needed something, proving nothing had changed. But I wasn't alone. With Matthew and my grandparents' trusted advisors, I established the Elizabeth and Harold Alexander Foundation for Education, dedicating a whopping $10 million to underprivileged students and schools in our community. We focused on arts, education, vocational training, areas my grandparents always felt were undervalued. And me? I went back to teaching kindergarten. People were shocked. A millionaire teacher? But my classroom at Sunshine Elementary became a dream. I personally funded new books, art supplies, cutting-edge technology the school budget could never cover. Every child got healthy snacks, winter coats if they needed them. Small expenses for me, but life-changing differences for them. Under Rosa Martinez's mentorship, I slowly learned the ropes of Alexander Logistics. I didn't take an active management role, but I made sure the company upheld my grandparents' values, their profit-sharing program for employees, generous retirement benefits. The business continued to thrive, providing stable employment for over 100 people in our community. My grandparents' house, once painfully empty, gradually transformed into a home again. I moved from the guest room into the master bedroom, though it took months before I could sleep there without feeling like an intruder. With Carlos's help, we renovated the huge basement into a vibrant community space for foundation events and educational programs. Dorothy, bless her heart, still came 3 times a week, refusing to fully retire, despite my insistence she'd more than earned it. My biological family? They made occasional attempts to contact me, but their motives were always crystal clear. My father would call when his company hit a rough patch, hinting broadly about short-term loans with handsome returns. My mother reached out when her social circle discovered my foundation, suddenly wanting to serve on the board. Jason would text when his latest venture inevitably failed, asking for startup capital. Aunt Pam even called around the holidays, suggesting family should be together, especially family with large houses suitable for hosting gatherings. Each time, I politely but firmly held my boundaries. I'd consider a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care, I told them, but never one based on financial advantage. Not one of them could meet those simple terms. Instead, I built new traditions with a chosen family my grandparents had cultivated. Sunday dinners continued, now hosted by me, with a rotating cast of incredible people, Rosa, Matthew, Carlos and his family, Dorothy, and so many others who had been part of my grandparents' circle. We celebrated holidays, shared milestones, supported each other through everything. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was a community bound by something far stronger than DNA, shared values, genuine affection, and deep, true love. One crisp autumn morning, so similar to the day of their accident, I visited my grandparents' graves for the first time since the funeral. I brought fresh flowers and sat on the small bench nearby, finally ready for the conversation I'd been avoiding. I'm trying my best to honor what you built, I told them, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking aloud. The foundation is making a difference. 3 students have already received full college scholarships who otherwise couldn't have gone. Your employees still speak about you with such respect. A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, sending golden leaves spiraling down. It was the kind of beautiful fall day Grandma had loved, perfect for baking and reading by the fireplace. I wish you were here to see it all, I continued, tears pricking my eyes. I have so many questions about decisions you made, investments you chose, people you helped. But I'm figuring it out, step by step. In the months since inheriting, I had discovered numerous quiet charities my grandparents had supported anonymously, children whose medical bills they'd paid, families whose homes they'd saved from foreclosure, employees whose children they'd put through college. All without public recognition, without praise. Thank you for trusting me, I whispered. I understand now why you made the choice you did. It was never really about the money. It was about values. About using resources for something meaningful, rather than status or power. As I sat there, memories washed over me, not with the sharp pain of recent grief, but with a bittersweet, profound appreciation for the time we'd shared. Grandpa teaching me to fish, Grandma showing me how to make her famous apple pie. Both of them attending every school play and graduation when my parents were always too busy. The inheritance had never been primarily about money. It had been about entrusting me with their legacy, their values, their vision of what wealth could truly accomplish when used with purpose and compassion. The very next day, I hosted the Foundation's first major event, a scholarship ceremony for 20 high school seniors who would receive full college funding. As I watched these bright, determined young people accept opportunities that would utterly change their trajectories, I felt my grandparents' presence strongly, almost physically. Among the recipients was Maria Vasquez, a brilliant young woman who reminded me so much of myself at that age, full of potential, but limited by financial constraints. She planned to become a teacher, to give back to her community, just as she had been supported. As the event concluded, Maria approached me, tears streaming down her face. "My parents both work 2 jobs," she said, her voice trembling. "No one in my family has ever gone to college. This changes everything. Not just for me, but for my younger siblings who now see it as possible." In that single, powerful moment, I understood completely what my grandparents had been building all along. Not just a business, not just a fortune, but a legacy of positive impact. A ripple effect that would continue long, long after they were gone. They had trusted me to amplify that effect, to carry their values forward in ways they would never see, but had envisioned. The money had indeed revealed true colors, showing me who valued wealth over relationship. But it had also revealed a community of genuine connection, people who had loved my grandparents for who they were, not what they owned. That was the true inheritance, more valuable than any dollar amount. As I move forward, I continue teaching, running the foundation, and learning the business. The wealth allows me to amplify good work, but it absolutely does not define me. I still live relatively simply, drive a practical car, and spend my weekends volunteering rather than shopping. My grandparents would approve, I think. They always said money was a tool, not a goal. And now I finally, truly understand what they meant. What about you? What's your experience with family and inheritance? Have you ever had to stand up to pressure from loved ones to do what you knew was right? I genuinely love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground. Remember, family is about love and respect, not obligation or advantage. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to honor your own values, whatever challenges you may face.